welcome back. Almost finished our story. If you remember from yesterday, Babe the pig has just been gotten ready for his day out at the sheepdog trials, and we shall see what happens today. After breakfast, she came out to see them off. Fly was sitting in the passenger seat. Babe was comfortable in a thick bed of clean straw in the back, where he now took up the whole space. Mrs. Hoggett walked around the Land Rover giving out farewell pats. "Good boy," she said to Babe, and "good girl" to Fly, and to Hoggett, "Goodbye, and have you got your sandwiches and your thermos of coffee and your raincoat? Looks as if it might rain, though I felt a spot just now, though I suppose it might be different where you're going, seeing as it's 100 miles away. And that reminds me, have you got enough gas, or do you need some money to get you there? I do mean drive carefully. See you later." 2 o'clock, said Hoggett. And before his wife had time to say anything, added, "On the telly, live," and put the Land Rover into gear and drove away. When Mrs. Hoggett switched the television on at 2 o'clock, the first thing in the picture she had noticed was that it was raining hard. She dashed outside to bring her washing in, saw that the sun was shining, remembered it wasn't wash day anyway, and came back to find the cameras showing the layout of the course. First, there was a shot of a huge pillar of stone the height of a man standing upright in the ground. "Here," said the voice of the commentator, "is where each handler will stand, and from here each dog will start his outrun. He can go left or right to get into position behind the sheep. Today, each dog will have 10 sheep to work. They will be grouped near that distant post called the holding post." All the time, the cameras followed his explanations. "And then he must fetch his sheep through the fetch gates all the way back to the handler's post and round it. Then the dog drives the sheep away, to the left, as we look at it, through the drive-away gates, turns them right again and straight across the line of his fetch, through the cross-drive gates and right again to the shedding ring. And when he's shed his sheep and collected them again, he must finally pen them here." "Mouthy old thing," said Mrs. Hoggett, turning the sound off. "Some folk never do know how to hold their tongues, keeping on and on and on about silly gates. Why doesn't he just show us a picture of the spectators? Might catch a glimpse of Hoggett and Fly, you never know. Though not the pig, I hope. He's surely not daft enough to walk with the pig. Can't see why he wanted to take him all the way, just to lie him in the back of the Land Rover. He'd have done better to leave him here and just sit and watch it on the telly in comfort, which is more than some of us have got time for. I've got work to do." And she stumped off into the kitchen, shaking her head madly. On the silent screen, the first handler walked out and took up his position beside the great sarsen stone, his dog standing beside him, tense and eager in the pouring rain. So that's just an explanation of what the handlers in the competition have got to do with their dogs. And there is just a picture here, if you can see, of what they have to do and the little map they have to follow. So there's the man standing here, and his dog has to go round and get the sheep and go through what is this pattern with them. So this is what Babe will be asked to do. Right, chapter 12, that will do. Hundreds of thousands of pairs of eyes watched the first dog, but none more keenly than those of Hoggett, Fly and Babe. The car park was a big sloping field overlooking the course, and the farmer had driven the Land Rover to the topmost corner, well away from other cars. From inside, the three so different faces watched intently. Conditions, Hoggett could see immediately, were very difficult. In addition to the driving rain, which made the going slippery and the sheep more obstinate than usual, there was quite a strong wind blowing almost directly from the holding post back towards the handler, and the dog was finding it difficult to hear commands. The more anxious the dog was, the more the sheep tried to break from him, and thus the angrier he became. It was a vicious cycle, and when at last the sheep were penned and the handler pulled the gate shut and cried, "That'll do," no one was surprised that they had scored no more than 70 points of a possible 100. So it went on. Man after man came to stand beside the great Sarsen stone, men from the north, from the west, from Scotland and Wales and Ireland, and dogs and more dogs, large and small, rough-coated and smooth, black, white or grey or brown or blue merle. Some fared better than others, of course. Some were steadier on their sheep, or had steadier sheep to deal with, but still, as Farmer Hoggett's turn drew near, as luck would have it, he was last to go. There was no score higher than 85. At home, Mrs. Hoggett chanced to turn the sound on the television back up in time to hear the commentator confirm this. "One more to go," he said, "and the target to beat is 85 points, set by Mr. Jones from Wales and his dog Bryn." A very creditable total considering the appalling weather conditions we have up here today. It's very hard to imagine that score being beaten, but here comes the last competitor to try and do just that. And suddenly there appeared on the screen before Mrs. Hoggett's eyes the tall, long, striding figure of her husband walking out towards the great stone with tubby old Fly at his heels. "This is Mr. Hoggett with Pig," said the commentator. A bit of a strange name that, but then I must say his dog's rather on the fat side. Hello, he's sending the dog back. What on earth? Oh, good heavens! Will you look at that? And as Mrs. Hoggett and hundreds of thousands of other viewers looked, they saw Fly go trotting back towards the car park, and from it, cantering through the continuing rain, came the long, lean, beautifully clean figure of a large white pig. Straight to Hoggett's side ran Babe and stood like a statue, his great ears fanned, his little eyes fixed upon the distant sheep. At home, Mrs. Hoggett's mouth opened wide, and for once no sound came from it. On the course there was a moment of stunned silence, and then a great burst of noise. On the screen, the cameras showed every aspect of the amazing scene. The spectators pointing, gasping, grinning, the red-faced judges hastily conferring, Hoggett and Babe waiting patiently, and finally the commentator. "This is really quite ridiculous," he said with a shamefaced smile. "But in point of the fact, there seems to be nothing in the rule book that says only sheepdogs may compete. So it looks as though the judges are bound to allow Mr. Hoggett to run this sheep pig, I suppose we'll have to call it. Ha! One look at it and the sheep will disappear into the next county without a doubt. Still, we might as well end the day with a good laugh." And indeed, at that moment, a great gale of laughter arose, as Hoggett, receiving a most unwilling nod from the judges, said quietly, "Away to me, pig," and Babe began his outrun to the right. How they roared at the mere sight of him running, although many noticed how fast he went, and at the purely crazy thought of a pig herding sheep, and especially at the way he squealed and squealed at the top of his voice in foolish excitement, they supposed. But though he was excited, tremendously excited at the thought of actually competing in the Grand Challenge sheepdog trials, Babe was nobody's fool. He was yelling out the password. "I may be ewe, I may be ram, I may be mutton, I may be lamb, but on the hoof or on the hook, I ain't so stupid as I look," as he ran. This was the danger point, before he'd met his sheep. And again he repeated the magic words, shouting above the noise of the wind and rain, his eyes fixed on the 10 sheep by the holding post. Their eyes were fixed on him, eyes that bulged at the sight of this great strange animal approaching, but they held steady, and the now distant crowd fell suddenly silent as they saw the pig take up a perfect position behind the sheep, and heard the astonished judges award 10 points for a faultless outrun. Just for luck, in case they hadn't believed their ears, Babe gave the password one last time. "I ain't so stupid as I look," he panted. "And a very good afternoon to you all, and I do apologise for having to ask you to work in this miserable weather. I hope you'll forgive me." At once, as he'd hoped, there was a positive babble of voices. Fancy him knowing the password. What lovely manners. Not like them nasty wolves. What do you want us to do, young master? Quickly, for he was conscious that time was ticking away, first asking politely for their attention, Babe outlined the course to them. And I would be really most awfully grateful, he said, if you would bear keeping those points in mind. Keep tightly together, go at a good steady pace, but not too fast, not too slow, and walk exactly through the middle of each of these 3 gates. If you'll be good enough. The moment I enter the shedding ring, with the 4 of you who are wearing the collars, how nice they look, by the way, please walk out of it. And then if you'd all kindly go straight into the final pen, I should be so much obliged. We'll leave it there for today, and we'll finish the book and find out how Babe does tomorrow.